Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, where we dive into the world of helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. In each episode, we talk with the technicians, engineers, and experts who keep helicopters flying. Because at the end of the day, no maintenance, no mission. Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS and in partnership with Vertical Magazine. In this two-part Vertical MRO Podcast series, I sit down and talk with Zina Hullings, the management analyst at the Ontario Police Department Air Support Unit, Eric Weidner, who was the Ontario Police Department Air Support Unit commander before retiring in 2016. Zina is the recipient of the prestigious Blades of Valor Recognition of Service, Courage, and Flight Award, an honor that celebrates 20 extraordinary professionals in the fields of aviation, helicopter emergency medical services, and public safety who've demonstrated outstanding courage, innovation, leadership, and unwavering commitment to saving lives. Zina Hullings has had a transformative impact on operations within her unit. Her deep understanding of aircraft capabilities, maintenance programs, and operational needs allows her to effectively bridge the gap between technical requirements and mission demands. She's been instrumental in managing the acquisition and integration of new aircraft technologies, which have significantly enhanced safety, efficiency, and mission effectiveness. Despite having no initial aviation background, Zina's proactive approach to learning about airframes, maintenance programs, and aircrew operations has empowered her to oversee complex aircraft procurement efforts, including the purchase of multiple aircraft and upcoming additions. Her leadership ensures that maintenance operations run smoothly, that aircraft are equipped with the latest technology, and that all operational gaps are identified and addressed. Her ability to coordinate with various departments and stakeholders, all while maintaining a focus on safety and performance, has elevated the standards of the entire unit. Through her meticulous management and dedication, Zina has set a new standard for operational readiness. Be sure to look for additional podcasts on the Vertical HeliCASTS platform and articles in Vertical Valor magazine highlighting the other 19 incredible recipients of the Blades of Valor Award. These individuals exemplify the courage, innovation, and leadership that define the very best in public safety aviation. Thank you to our sponsors, Safe Structure Designs, Airbus, and Precision Aviation Group. Hey, welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast. I'm today's host, Jon Gray, with us today to have a really interesting conversation with somebody who I highly admire. Actually, two folks I highly admire. One's a veteran of the Vertical HeliCASTS platform, Eric Weidner. You've been on the podcast about 35 times now. Is that about right?
I think it's 36, but yeah, you're close.
And our purpose in today's conversation is to highlight the Blades of Valor recognition program that Vertical's implemented. I think in our industry, we do a really good job of highlighting the machinery, the equipment that we use to complete the missions in the helicopter community, but we don't oftentimes focus on the people, and the people is what makes it all happen. So this year we decided that we're going to put an emphasis on highlighting the folks that make the missions possible, and it's oftentimes people are looking at the pilot, the TFO, the hoist operator, the folks that are part of the aircrew, and the folks that actually make the missions happen are people like Zina Hullings, our guest, who's the backbone of our operation. We'll get into what Zina does, and the maintenance personnel that makes the missions possible. Linda Reno coined a term, no maintenance, no mission, and it speaks to the importance of our maintenance community. And it's absolutely true. So Zina, the stuff that you've done over the course of your career is really interesting. The role that you've played here at Air Support, the Ontario Police Department, I don't think you fully comprehend the impact you've had on everybody. From making sure we go home at the end of the day to making sure our training is approved, that the maintenance operations are ongoing, the funding is in place for all the parts and acquisitions that need to happen. So again, excited to go through the role that you've played in this, not just the unit here, but regionally. And Eric, you've had a big hand in not just regional stuff now. You with CNC Technologies, you guys are doing stuff globally. Right. Your impact is felt that wide, and Zina, yours is too. Through the things you've done with the department, and that's kind of got the ripple effect. So, thank you for all the stuff you do to make all these missions possible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor to sit here with you. I think we've talked about the podcast a lot, in particular the Hangar Z podcast, which I should focus on for a minute. The Hangar Z podcast was conceived here in this hangar at Hangar Z at Capel Airport in Upland, California. People always ask me for the story behind Hangar Z, and I think they're expecting some extravagant story, and it's actually, no, it's just the hangar that I flew out of at Capel Airport.
Some clandestine location. bored into the side of a mountain that there's nobody really has directions to, right?
Like the volcano in Airwolf. Remember? Right. That was really cool. Did you watch Airwolf as a kid, Zina?
I did. I'm a little bit older than you, Jon. So, yeah.
You know, I had a guy that was training. We were doing some training with back when I was a police officer. We were working with horses, and he used to say, "It's so simple, it's going to hurt." And at first, I was like, "What does that mean?" But we as humans typically try to make everything so complicated that when you reduce things down to their basic level, sometimes we struggle with it.
Yeah.
Because it is so simple, and we're so designed to make things more complicated than they're supposed to be.
That's so true.
So when people ask you, I'm sure they do, they look at you like, what? It's where you worked? You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But being that we're at Hangar Z, it's really cool to be on location at an airport when we're recording. So background noise is brought to you by Cessna and
Cessna, Piper.
And then, of course, you'll hear the police dispatch radio from time to time. Just ignore that. Just pretend that doesn't exist.
Right.
As long as it's not an emergency.
Well, again, just touching on the Blades of Valor Recognition Award, I'm just going to read a little bit about that award that came from our editor, Jen Evans, from Vertical Valor magazine. So the award's designed for everyday professionals in public safety aviation and helicopter emergency medical services who put their skills, courage, and compassion to work in the service of others. The Blades of Valor recognition of service, courage, and flight honors the individuals who go above and beyond, whether through heroic missions, innovative leadership, or unwavering commitment behind the scenes. So I think the innovative leadership and unwavering commitment behind the scenes applies to you, Zina, and the things that you've done here. It was really important for us to not just focus again on the aircrew, but focus on the people that actually make these things happen. I thought it was important to bring Eric into this conversation for a lot of reasons. One, I love Eric and the impact he's had not only in my life, but our industry's life.
True.
But you kind of helped facilitate Zina coming to Air Support. Can you talk about, well, first, can you introduce yourself, what your role is now and kind of what your background is and kind of how you wound up in the seat?
Well, for those that don't know, I was a police officer with Ontario for 30 years. In the last 14, 15 of that was in the air unit. And for the last 7 of that, I ran the air unit. And I was fortunate enough to bring you in as an integral and important member of the unit.
I think I bothered you long enough until you couldn't say no.
Yeah, well, that was part of it.
See, he brought us both in.
Yeah.
But I had always dealt with Zina because Zina was the person downtown at the police headquarters that kind of did everything. So there was rarely something that I would have to deal with that I wouldn't interact with Zina on, because she kind of was the jack of all trades in that it didn't matter whether it was ammunition, for airborne use of force or purchase orders or whatever. It was that we were always interacting. And I became keenly aware that as we were trying to grow the unit, after I took over, we said we wanted to expand the unit from 2 helicopters to 3 helicopters. We wanted to expand the number of aircrew, and we wanted to expand the number of mechanics, full-time mechanics. And the person that I took the unit over from, Brad Schneider, had a handle on everything. He was a master at management, organizing, everything. And so I inherited this amazing blueprint roadmap, but I could see that it was going to get a lot more complicated. And I was just keeping the chainsaws in the air at that point. And so the future me said, hey, you better do something, because this is going to become unsustainable for one person. So in the back of my mind, I started thinking, I need to get somebody up here that can understand this stuff. But of course, with any specialized unit, the challenge is, because it's specialized, it's not common knowledge. And it takes a while for people to understand the ins and outs and the ups and downs and so forth. And so then you struggle with, well, who do I bring up? Because it can't just be anybody. So for, I think, about a 6-month period, we had a lady named Diane Probst. And she and her husband had always owned small airplanes, and she was they kept their airplane on the same airport that we were based on. So from that standpoint, it was a good fit. She would come up part-time, very, very part-time, and help us with kind of some basic paperwork, take some of the load off me so that I could continue to do that, which I was trying to do. That window closed and we weren't able to have her up. And that's when I fixed my sights on Miss Zina, because after dealing with her, I was like, this could work. You know, Zina's kind of got this background where she didn't have aviation, but she had everything else. And so I thought, we can teach her the aviation stuff. She'll pick that up like through osmosis, because when you're around it every single day, you know, you can't help but learn it. So I think Zina was at a place where
I could say it needed to be challenged.
Yeah.
I think something different.
I don't think the path that maybe she had anticipated was opening up. And so my thought was, well, I just asked her, would you ever be interested in coming to work for us at Air Support? And she said she thought about it, but she said, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was just a matter of getting the approval to get her to come up.
You think about the position that you're in. This position requires you to have a full understanding of the governmental process and how to navigate that system, and that's challenging for anybody. You know, so I think when you consider someone, if they're in a governmental agency or even in the private industry, sometimes understanding how to navigate government paperwork, how to navigate purchase processes, and you know, all the things that go with that, it's really challenging to find somebody with that kind of expertise and experience. And you had that, you know, from your experience prior to the police department, your experience in the police department. You were well versed in purchase orders and how to make things happen. And that's what you need, is somebody who can make things happen. You know, your workload as a sergeant in charge of the air support unit was insane. Not only are you in charge of personnel and equipment, but you're also in charge of all the administrative side of making these things happen, which usually, if things are running properly, there's people in place to do those types of things. And we, unfortunately, at that time didn't have that person. So it was sitting on your shoulders and the part-time personnel that would come up from time to time. And that would filter into the hangar for Aaron at the time, was our only mechanic. And he was also trying to balance some of that. So the time that he was spending away from actually maintaining the aircraft or mission equipment was spent doing some of the work that had to be done, right?
Right. And I mean, you can't really, the amount of things that have to happen to keep this unit just running on a daily basis. You know, we pump 65,000 gallons of jet fuel a year. So we have to have a fuel truck. Well, that fuel truck has to be filled up. It has to be maintained. There's a whole group of things that have to be done with that. But just aside from that, from the facility standpoint, you know, we have a RAG service, we have a towel service, we have a waste remediation service, we have
water filtration.
Water filtration. We have a crane service that has to certify the gantry crane, you know, quarterly. So that's just a few of the things. So those things, I mean, nobody would realize it, but when you're sitting downstairs and you're the only one that's, you know, there's a lot of folders that come in and out of the file cabinet, because there's just so many different functions and aspects to keeping this place going. You know, when you think about it, you have 3 helicopters, but you have a forklift, you have an ATV, you know, and every single one of those things needs maintenance. It's a city vehicle, so it requires accountability. You know, we have fire suppression systems, fire safety equipment, all of that has to be certified, maintained. And it's just, and then, you know, you have consumables. We go through a ton of consumables here. And so it's the list that never gets any shorter. And as anybody can understand when they're doing anything in law enforcement, in this day and age, it seems like there's twice as much to do and less time to do it in. And so the ability to leverage additional help and get people that can share the load is critical.
Yeah.
And I actually think, speaking of one of the first projects that when I was still at the station that Eric brought, I think to kind of get my feet wet, he goes, because at that time we were leasing the fuel truck, remember that? And he says, I think I want to purchase a fuel truck for air support. And you kind of had this little proposal and you said, find out what you can. And I know you were doing your homework on the backside. And that was kind of a little taste of...
Was that like the initiation for her?
I don't know. I just remember it was, how are we going to fund this? Let's buy one.
Yeah.
I remember we had this, like a copier. And once again, stuff that you don't think about, but there's a lot of paper that got printed, copies that had to be made, logs, all these different things, maintenance pages. So we had a commercial copier, and I had wanted one that was color, and they needed one downtown, and they on occasion they would hijack.
Yes.
They would basically hijack money out of our air support account. It would kind of just get funneled out, and then you're left to go, hey, what happened to the money? Oh,
maybe hijack's not a good word.
Yeah,
they would borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
Kind of little shell game.
And so this opportunity came up, and they said, well, the watch commander needs a new a copier, a copy machine. And I said, well, ours is like 2 years old. It's in perfect condition. They don't need anything extravagant. So here's what we'll do. We're going to have our machine picked up, taken down there, installed, and then we're going to buy a new machine. And I think I enlisted Zina's help to help facilitate that.
Forgot about that.
And at the end of the day, everybody was happy. We got what we needed to support what we were doing. And then in turn, they got what they needed. And so,
yeah, I think that's what everyone needs is someone who can understand, again, the processes that need to be navigated to make things happen.
Sure.
Whether you're in a private maintenance facility or a governmental hangar, there's challenges everywhere that needs somebody like Zina to figure out how to navigate that to get what you need done. So I want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
When Eric first approached you and proposed this idea of going to aviation, what aviation experience had you had? Because I know you hadn't had a ton. And what was your initial thought? Was it overwhelming to you, or were you like, oh no, this is great? Safe Structure Designs offers creative, customizable ergonomic safety solutions with over 20 years of experience. Their custom design process is free, ensuring safety and efficiency. Let them create your ideal solution. Visit www.safe-2.com. That's www.safe-2.com for more information.
To be honest, Eric, like he had mentioned earlier, he would come down every week because they had staff meetings, and of course he would bring me his weekly stuff. And so I had a little taste of everything that air support had to deal with. But when the suggestion had come up, I was like, you know what? I'm up for the challenge. Because I think at that point, I kind of also felt I was a little underutilized and was getting burned out on kind of just being the resource for the whole department, which wasn't a bad thing because, of course, I always look at it as everything as a great experience. But I was definitely up for the challenge. And, and you're also looking at bigger projects, purchasing helicopters, selling helicopters, finding new things for the hangar, their necessities, and kind of going in that direction. So I was like, I'm up for this.
Eric talked about all the things that are up here that we rely on the maintenance staff to fix, from helicopters to whatever. On top of that, you've got these police officers who are pilots and TFOs who like to break things, and so they're not only adding to Aaron's workload at the time, but your workload, because ultimately you're the one that has to figure out how to get these budgets in place to pay for this stuff.
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest obstacles is all the red tape you have to jump through, because again, it's government, so all the bureaucracy. But I think one of the other harder challenges with these high maintenance guys, because they're high maintenance, is I had to learn to say no. We can't do that, or we can't purchase that, or we can't use those funds, but we can go this direction. So that was a challenge at first because, Eric liked air support to have some nice things. And, how do you want to say? All the
accoutrements?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's funny you say that, but it's all the things that Eric brought to our unit made us more effective and efficient.
Yes.
And there was a plan behind, or at least I think there was a plan and a goal with all these things that was taking place. And in the moment it was hard to see because I'm a line TFO at the time, and Eric's like, go fly 5,000 hours a night. We're like, what are you talking about? There's not even 5,000 hours in a day. But the ultimate goal was to increase the size of our fleet, and that all lent to that. And then it comes back to you. Let's now figure out how to support all the additional activity that's taking place. But let's go back to where you grew up, kind of some of your early experiences in school, and some of the jobs you had that led you to ultimately getting hired at the police department.
Well, I'm a local girl, Southern California. Grew up in Upland. Went to school at St. Lucy's, Glendora. Also attended OLA in Claremont for elementary school. And then from there, went to UC Irvine and came back to Claremont, and went to the Claremont colleges, my first job. But, in between that, high school, I worked at Hallmark, if you guys remember that.
Yeah.
Miller's Outpost. I don't know.
I remember that. Place was awesome.
That was, the known. And then also worked in the mall. But, it was just, just to get my feet wet and so forth. And then when I went to the Claremont colleges, that was my first I actually had a friend that had recommended me for a position there. And she was great. Every time she got promoted, she took me under her wing. I learned stuff. It was in development. And that was my first taste of big events and fundraising and money. And she kind of saw, like Eric, the direction that I could go in. And she's like, you're going to be my side kick, and we're just going to go ask for money, hit up with these, alumni and see what they give us. And then from there, with all the events and, because the Claremont colleges have big money.
Yeah, let's talk about the Claremont colleges for a minute, because there's probably a lot of listeners who don't really understand what the Claremont colleges are. It's a significant campus, and it's broken up over a lot of different schools. Can you talk about the significance of the programs? There's
5 colleges and then 2 graduate schools. And I was working at Scripps, which is the all-female campus. They have great alumni with money. Some of them are well-known. Like one of our board of trustees owned the Seattle Mariners at the time.
Wow.
So a lot of them, and old school money. So
it's known as the Ivy League of the West Coast.
Yes.
They're
always in the top 25 colleges in the nation.
And I didn't know this, but Zina used to always share these facts with me. They have a huge recruiting team that would go to the East Coast and recruit these young kids from these old money families who didn't want to go to Harvard because it was rainy and terrible weather, and they would bring them out here and take them to the beach and Universal Studios, and then say, you can basically get the same education, but in Southern California.
It's so true.
But wherever you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were really successful at getting
Yes.
these families with huge bank accounts to send their kids out here to go to school.
Yeah. I remember at one point, Barack Obama had sent his wife and one of their daughters out here. I think you were here as well, and we had to do a bunch of perimeter scouting from the helicopter to make sure that there was no weaknesses in the protection force that was put in place to help them. But just I guess the reason why I bring that up is it kind of illustrates how prestigious that school is. You've got
Yes.
U.S. president level people who are wanting to send their kids to the Claremont colleges.
Oh yeah,
So
a lot of celebrities and rich and famous people have their kids that go there.
So you find yourself there doing some fundraising. Talk about your experience there and how that ultimately helped you here.
Well, actually, when I started, we were in the midst of a $100 million capital campaign. So
A what?
$100 million. $100 million. Yes. So this is where they pulled out all the stops and we did events, and it was one fundraising event after another. And we would even go visit alumni and, ask them for money. But their goal was to meet $100 million. And we not only met it, but we superseded that amount.
Wow.
So it was a great learning experience. That's where I first got my taste in grants. we would hit up like the Milken Foundation, Keck Foundation, USC. And I mean, it was an eye-opening experience because the amount of money, like Eric had mentioned, was just amazing.
Yeah.
These people had no problem writing $1 million check and, hey, name the dorm after me. And then from that experience, it was just went into my next career where I worked for UCR. I was actually headhunted. After we met the capital campaign goal, I was approached and somebody said, I have a position for you at UCR. Would you be interested? Well, my plan was to stay there. I loved, the Claremont colleges and the area, and I'm from this area. But it was a proposition I couldn't pass up. I was like, you know what? I was going to be doing something completely different, which was undergraduate and graduate student affairs and faculty recruitment. So went ahead and took the position, did that, was at UCR for 7 years. Loved it, loved student affairs, faculty recruitment. It was interesting.
So UCR, for folks that aren't familiar, it's University of California, Riverside. And Riverside's, about 30-minute drive or so from here? And you find yourself commuting there, and that experience, even though it was different, still continued to develop this skill set that you ultimately end up using here.
It was. And I think the most interesting part was the faculty recruitment, because I literally would go pick up the faculty at the airport, bring them back, would talk with them, engage with them. What's their specialty? Why do they want to come to California? And I know the dean's big goal was for me to kind of poke and prod and see, what do they plan on bringing to the campus? Are they bringing grants? Do they want to, increase the faculty enrollment, which parlayed into my graduate student affairs and undergraduate student affairs work. And I would also have to just review their resumes, go through everything, their CVs, make sure everything that they met all the quotas of doing books and publishing. Did they have goals of doing sabbatical? And then I would have to, if they did get a grant and they got hired, then I would have to monitor and follow their grant and budget it. So, and make sure that the students met all the requirements, because for like NSF grants, they had to be an American citizen, or U.S. citizen. Foreign students couldn't work on the grants. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. I would have to calculate GPAs, make sure students were eligible. So that was a whole different, from fundraising to faculty recruitment and, recruiting students.
The grant side of it is huge as it translates over to here. Eric, you did a really good job of incorporating UWASI grants into our operation. So once that kind of came into place, you were already here, right?
Yes.
Operating under the...
No, because...
Oh, not up here, yeah.
I inherited that grant from Brad Schneider. So Brad Schneider had gotten the grant approved before I was promoted. Because I remember as soon as I was promoted, it was kind of handed to me. And I remember thinking, first of all, I don't even know anything about grants. And I don't even know if we should be doing downlink or any of this stuff. So there was a huge learning curve there. But what I started understanding as I started learning was, as soon as I realized that Zina had this background, it was like my antennas are always up, as anybody that knows me knows. So I'm always looking for potentials, potential things that we can utilize, or potential things that we can acquire, or potential things that we can make better. And so in doing so, the more I got to know Zina, I thought, man, this is, I mean, some of her skill set wasn't directly transferable, but everything that she had been experienced in was, I thought, super, super vital to what we do. And, I mean, if I had to say, like, if somebody said, well, what's Zina's job description? It's like I would seriously have to think about it for a long period of time, because it's an administrative assistant who also is, like a grant manager auditor, a purchasing supervisor, acquisitions, payroll, payables, facility manager, team mom.
Yeah. How many days have we joked that Zina had
mom and nose wiper?
Hey, I'm competing with Paul on that. Okay, Mama Bear, I gotta.
Yeah,
I think
not every unit has a chief pilot that's a mama bear. So we have two of those, but she does so many different things, and you know that from being in the unit, that it's difficult to try to like describe what it is she does, because she touches so many different things. And so as I got to know her, where my mind was going, I was always like, man, I need somebody like this. And so I think that was the other part that appealed to both of us. Was I think I got an understanding of her and she got an understanding of me. And we both got the idea that we had similar mindsets, and we had complementary skill sets, meaning I had the idea to want to do something. I just didn't know how to do it, but she did. So that was the thing and my goal is always to have people that are way more qualified than you are, because that's how things get done and that's how things grow.
Yep. That's the best trait of a good leader, in my mind, is someone who surrounds themselves with people that they view as better than themselves. You know, there's no insecurities there. Ego's getting checked, and you're making sure the folks around you are, like you said, better than you are.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where when you give people tasks, or if we, the event thing, we would have citizens academies, we would have different events up here. We would have
fly-in events.
Mm-hmm. We would have dignitaries that would come through. And I never had to worry about anything, because Zina would think of everything, and she would think about the stuff that I would never think of. So these people would be getting ready to walk out the door, and Zina would hand them a gift bag with an air support t-shirt and a tumbler in it. And those are the things that will put an impression over the top. So they may have had a great flight and they may have had a good experience talking to people, but oftentimes it's the person that goes the extra mile that really kind of solidifies and cements the experience. And so one of the things I always appreciated about Zina was it didn't matter what I gave her to do or what I asked her to do. I knew that it would get taken care of. And a lot of times it would get taken care of, and even more so in a way that I hadn't anticipated, but that was always a pleasant surprise. And so then it's like, you feel like you've made the best decision in the world.
Yeah. Talk about what your job would have been like had Zina not showed up. Talk about the growth of the unit and where you found yourself, and kind of try and think through what that would have looked like for you.
I would have resigned. I would have quit.
That's not true.
I did it for 2.5 or 3 years by myself. But having had said that, it was a 10 to 12 hour, 5 days a week or 6 days a week job. And that was just to kind of keep the ship kind of going in the right direction. We talk about the facility and all the things that go into that. But the other thing that you don't understand is, or a lot of people don't understand, is we had, 14 full-time employees here. Every single one of them has to have in-service training. They're all full-time employees of the city. All the sworn personnel have to have all kinds of, Cal Post training and certification every year. And so aside from emergency procedures that the pilots have to have, airborne use of force training, which every member in the unit has to have, you have this whole myriad of required training for the regular patrol department personnel. And so if you just look at that, like that would make me dizzy, because you're having to schedule 12 guys or 12 police officers to get, and everybody has to get through these training certifications. And so now you've got pilots, and you're trying to get the pilots to do emergency procedures, but also they have to do mental health training. And so it was this constant plate spinning. And then at the end of the day, when you think you've got all the plates spinning, you realize that there are 3 other sets of plates, the building and the new helicopter that you have to purchase. And by the way, we need another maintenance person. And so you've got to get, and it's just, it'll it will test your multitasking skills.
Absolutely. I guarantee there's a bunch of folks listening to this right now saying, I need a Zina, you know,
Right.
and a lot of them, I mean, they're going to be from all over the world and all different types of applications, but governmental agencies we'll focus on for now. What advice do you have for the DOM, the head of operations who's identified, hey, I need someone like Zina. How do I get this justified? What were some of the tactics and persuasions you used to justify the need for a Zina?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Well, I think the first thing I did was I tried to establish myself as somebody who was responsible and would get things done. And I think that was important because when you go to ask for things when you're not getting things done, that's not the best position to be in. And so what I tried to do was establish consistency and reliability. And then based on that, say, hey, if you guys trust my judgment, which I think you do, trust that we need this position because it will allow increased efficiency. It will allow us to spread the load out. It'll also give us some retention because, you know, if I end up going IOD, injured on duty, there's nobody else that even knows what 90% of this stuff is that has to be done. So when you have one person doing it, you have a chokehold on the institutional memory in an organization, and that's not a good thing to have. And so then that speaks to a whole other problem, which is delegation. And it sounds really simple and straightforward, and it's not. It's not when you are in a position of authority or responsibility, and you're maybe, I don't know, hypothetically a control freak. I'm not saying that I am. I'm just saying like some people maybe are.
We won't mention names.
And the difficult part is you really have to learn to let go. And the argument that any person that's like this understands is somebody will say, well, why don't you get some help doing that? Because by the time I explain to somebody how to do it, I could just do it. Now I'm taking time to explain how to do it when I could just get it done. And it's this thing where it's because you're on this hamster wheel, your horizon picture is all messed up. And you have to literally get off the hamster wheel before you can actually see the horizon. And that was one of the things that, like when I spoke about Diane, the first lady that I had come out, one of the things that really helped me with was trying to figure out, because, you know, I remember she would come out and I'd be sitting there thinking, now what am I going to have her do? Because she's not here all the time. So I can't really have her delve into this because that's a really in-depth project. What I came to realize was it wasn't so much about what specific things she was doing. It was just about the fact that she was there helping shoulder the load. And so I think to anybody that's in a position where they're doing everything, where they're, you know, checking the air in the tires, balancing the budget, and ordering the rubber gloves, you have to just learn that you've got to let go of some of it. Because and you just have to explain expectations and pick the right people and trust that it's going to get done.
That selection process is huge, you know, and I think about the selection of Zina, and you talk about, you know, being unsure when you hand a project over to somebody what the end result's going to be. But with Zina, everything that comes back, you're like, holy cow, this is better than I even pictured, you know? So to get somebody like that you hit the jackpot.
It's a win. And I like to think that I pat myself on the back because I feel like I could see the value. I could see this diamond in the rough. And I felt like, if we can just knock off some of the stuff around the edges, this is it. She can do it all. And I think, not being a super philosophical person, but I'm very kind of in belief that the universe does what the universe does. And I think we found each other at the right time, and that like I said, our ideas and our thoughts aligned. And I think where she was at wasn't where she was really supposed to be. And so I think
I agree with that.
I think it ended up being
a
really good.
When I think back to your time at Air Support, at least when I was here, you had a big hand in growing our unit, increasing the capability of our aircraft, our fleet, our mission equipment, our mission sets. You invested a lot of capital and time and money into what this program is now. But I think when I think through all the stuff, all the improvements that were made, Zina, obviously was the thing that is still here.
Yeah.
She's the thing that's been the constant through all the change in personnel. I mean, you're the kind of the last of the Mohicans here as far as personnel that
I know
that
a lot of changes.
But that's, I think, investing in people is, I guess, what I'm getting at. All the investment that you made in Zina and kind of explaining your expectation, the mission that you saw, she became a stakeholder in that.
Took complete ownership, and I think that's why she's been so successful. It gave her the ability to own this skill set and to do all these things, where it wasn't somebody constantly just saying do this or do that. It was in a lot of cases she had the autonomy to figure out how best to do something and then just get it done.
That's why I'd go back in her office every once in a while and see her pulling her hair out.
Yeah.
It beats the hangar roof, okay? But I have to say, to Eric's credit, the other great thing that he did was he networked. I mean, which made it feel comfortable for me, because he made a point to get to know everybody at City Hall. And so when he said, hey, these are the goals I want for Air Support, and would talk about certain things and say, this is where I want to grow the department and the unit and take it to a whole new level, it made me feel comfortable, because I knew he had talked to everybody, had already laid the groundwork and said, this is where we want to go. And communication was a good part of that as well, because he said, hey, it's not going to be easy, but I know he would, reassure me, you could do this. I have faith in you. And, I want you to help me take this to a whole nother level.
Yeah. And you did, which is awesome. Going back to your time at UCR and at the Claremont colleges, those networking skills you developed there came in handy and key here when you're dealing with politicians that would come in through the front door.
Definitely.
The whole list of unique folks that would find themselves at Air Support. And that kind of goes back to the marketing side and the networking that Eric did. And I'll get back to that in a minute, because I think it's important for folks to hear your marketing perspective and kind of how that laid the groundwork for the growth of this unit. But before we get there, I want to go back to your early days here at Air Support and kind of get your thoughts on what were some of the things when you first showed up here that seemed intimidating. You're like, holy cow, I didn't realize kind of what I was getting into.
I don't think I was intimidated. I think I was more just kind of in awe of how much Air Support encompassed. Like Eric had said earlier, you've got cranes, you've got, forklifts and the helicopter. And then he was talking about purchasing another helicopter. And I think it was just all the incidentals and consumables. It was like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. And trying to keep track of everything, and then going through all the annuals and things that they had to purchase. And it was just, and then looking at the budget, because the budget was big, and you're like, wow, okay, this is huge.
Everything in aviation is expensive.
Yes.
When you think back to, a kid growing up in Upland, being around the airport, did you ever envision a day where you'd find yourself coming to work here every day?
No, but I was never one, like I've always been one for challenges, like I said earlier. So even as a kid, we were fortunate. My parents would send us, we had family that was out of state. So they would put us on a plane at like 6, 7 years old, and me and my brother, and we would just fly to go visit our cousins out of state. So I was used to it. This is kind of cool. At one point, didn't ponder it long. I thought, oh, maybe I could be an airline steward. This would be fun. But I mean, other than that, I had really no huge desire to go, okay, this is what I want to do, aviation.
You found your way here.
Yeah. Again, thanks to Eric. So
Yeah, she found her way, but it also grabbed her like a bear trap and drug her into the front door.
That's fair. Sorry, you can't leave.
That's right.
that's it.
I used to have this thought in the back of my mind, which was, what happens when Zina figures out the real story up here and how much is involved, and she tries to leave? And I used to think, like, how am I going to explain this, and how am I going to unwind this thing, or what am I going to do? And then I would just say, okay, don't think about that. Let's just move forward. But and it all worked out.
It did.
Eric, when you think about maintenance operations here, again, I think when Zina got here, we only had one mechanic. Aaron was our mechanic. We were trying to go to two. Can you talk about how Zina in her role was able to streamline and alleviate some of the pressure that Aaron, who is the sole mechanic in our shop, had building on him at the time?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Well, a big part of it is, and what I wanted to touch on was, and I don't know if it's still the case, when I was here as a unit, we had more annual purchase orders than by a mile than any other unit in
the department.
Mm-hmm. And what that means is every year, each one of those purchase orders, which is an open purchase order with a specific vendor, so that whenever you need something, you can contact that vendor, acquire whatever you need to acquire, and it's covered under that purchase order. And we would have sometimes like 20
at
something,
least
29,
mm-hmm.
I think one year we had. And then you look at the unit that has the next most POs, and it would be like 6 or 7.
Yeah, and that was training.
So that speaks to the involvement of what Zina was able to do for us, because it really was like juggling chainsaws or spinning plates or whatever analogy you want to use. It always felt like I was 1 second away from things crashing down in all directions. And so the ability for Zina to come on and start helping shoulder, manage, and facilitate that was immense. But along with that, when we realized that we needed to add a mechanic, it just goes to the same thing. It's shouldering the paperwork that's involved, the communication that's involved, because you have to be talking to the city personnel department. And it's a medium-sized city, so there's a lot of people involved. But the challenge was, and the thing I didn't understand initially was, the person that we were looking for wasn't looking for a job. And I think in a lot of cases that's the situation, and I don't think people realize it when they start down the road. The person that you're looking for is a very specific skill set, typically a very specific personality, because you can't have an egghead come in and integrate into this environment. It won't work. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with them, but this segment is interesting. Oftentimes there's a lot of group A personalities, and so you have to have somebody that can integrate into that. Otherwise they're not going to be happy and they're not going to stay. So you're looking for somebody that isn't out they're not sitting on the couch watching daytime soap operas waiting for somebody to call them. They're gainfully employed, and what you need to do is somehow get on their radar and give them something that's better than what they currently have, whether it's pay or whether it's a shorter commute or whether it's just a smaller shop, which maybe they didn't realize they wanted when they started wherever they were working. And so it was just a matter of, along with Zina, trying to educate the personnel department, that you can't just throw a baited hook into the water and think that you're going to catch the perfect employee, because it's not going to happen. It's way more selective and way more specific than that. And so I think that was the educational journey that we embarked on, was this realization that finding this person is going to be a lot more difficult than we thought it was. And I think to anybody that's in the process of trying to find a mechanic or personnel for certain specific jobs, they'll appreciate that. And the other thing was with mechanics, I realized that the span or the area that we were looking at was roughly Phoenix to Santa Monica. Maybe you could argue maybe Palm Springs to Santa Monica, but and then Santa Barbara to San Diego. And so when you typically would think about recruiting for a job, you would be thinking about the local community, maybe the local communities, maybe 2 or 3 cities or a little conglomerate of towns, but you're not thinking about a large geographic area the size of basically the entire Southern California. But that's where we had to look because of what we were trying to find. So it was a process.
And I agree on it, and because I could say that was probably one of my first learning curves. I remember sitting with Eric and I'm thinking, oh, we're going to get tons of applications, mechanic. But he's like, this is a specialized field. And that's kind of that when it opened my eyes to things and going, okay. And then he would say, it's like just how he said, it's going to be from here to there. It's a specialized field. We are looking for a particular person. And they also have to kind of be able to fit with this small group. And I was like, wow, okay. I just thought it was going to be kind of like a normal, applicants apply. We're going to get 100 applicants. Of course, everybody wants to come work for a law enforcement air support agency, but that wasn't the case. And it was interesting because I think we didn't get quite a few applications and I was kind of shocked by that. But then this was, again, a learning curve. It's like, these are things you just kind of encounter and go with it.
And, we would get stuff from all over the place and people with absolutely no experience, but they would write a comment like, but I think it would be fun to learn this. And you're like, okay, well, that's a cute thought. But unfortunately, right now, we're not in the let's learn this phase. We need a qualified mechanic that can hit the ground literally running. And so that was the other side of it is, talking about moving forward from where they are now and what that looks like. And I think Fitz and some of the guys had brought up like intern programs and different things to try to stimulate local interest because there's actually 2 A&P airframe and power plant programs, one at Chaffey College, which is close, and one at Mount San Antonio. And so reaching out to those places and seeing about having people come in and get a taste of what this is. And I think you kind of you've got to seed the field before things grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I love that idea that Fitz had. We're in an environment now with AMPs, AMEs, maintenance technicians, where there's a shortage everywhere, worldwide. So everyone's kind of competing for this small group of really qualified personnel to come and work at your place. So to your point, how do we seed the field? Well, let's bring in some apprentices as they go through school or as they kind of transition to this environment. They're learning, and by the time they finish school, they've got some experience, and then we can plug them into the
hands-on training.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to require us looking at some unique solutions to some of these problems, just like that.
Right. We don't do out of the box really well, but I mean, I think one of the things that was fortunate about Air Support was we were able to do a little bit of out of the box thinking because we were so unique and we had a little bit more latitude because of the mission and the overall function of the unit. We had a little bit more latitude with what we did. So it allowed us some out-of-the-box thinking in certain areas, which isn't traditional for law enforcement. Like I've always said, they consider change a 4-letter word, right? Nobody likes change. Nobody likes anything different. But I think if it was the private sector, I would entertain like a scholarship. I would entertain scholarshiping kids through these A&P programs to get them and then, as part of the scholarship, you have a 1 or 2 year or a 2 summer internship or something that you're required to complete. But I think the same thing could be done on the city level, where you obviously you can't provide the monetary assistance, but there are different things you can do to reach out to that segment and start creating the bridge or the pathway before they're actually leaving. I think that's the idea, is traditionally, well, once they get their A&P license, then we'll talk. But I think what everybody's learning now is you've got to start creating the relationship and the pathway way before that happens.
Yeah. There's a lot of folks out there, again, competing for that small group of folks that are qualified at that point to jump in there. So if you don't have a relationship early on, you're behind the eight ball,
Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, like Eric said, in the private sector, you can just hire whoever you want and just, say, okay, this is the man I want for the job. But working for the city and government, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. You forget, I have to talk with HR. We have to take the new position, if it's a newly created position, to council and make sure it passes budget. I mean, there's just a whole gamut of laundry list of items that you have to do. And that was another thing coming from the private sector, especially with the Claremont colleges, where money was unlimited. And then coming into a city and you're like, wow, okay, I got to learn real quick what obstacles I can jump through and get accomplished. So
talking about going to council, that's one thing that you understood really well, is how the city political structure worked and how that process took place and when things need to be submitted and how things need to be submitted. It's not as simple as just here's what I want. There's a whole process that goes into that, and a whole set of understanding that has to be in place before you can kind of navigate that. Being that you came from the private sector and that wasn't the world you operated in, and how did you kind of learn that system?
It was, I have to be honest, it was difficult at first, because from Claremont, I went to UC Riverside, and that's an entity of the state. So that was kind of a little bit of an eye-opening experience for me, where it was like, okay, everything wasn't unlimited. And that's where I slowly got to get a taste of all the red tape. Okay, this is what I need to do. Let me learn this. Okay, how do we navigate through all these obstacles? So fortunately, then when I came to the city of Ontario, that definitely helped me, because I already kind of knew some of the procedures and how to take things forward and move them forward.
Yeah, that's a super challenging part of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back for a second to adding the second mechanic, who ended up being guy we lovingly refer to as Fitz. You talked about the applicants that came in. I'm sure there was a good number of applicants that were qualified in the sense that they had an A&P or an IA, but they maybe weren't in a position to pass the background process you had to go through. Can you, for folks that are listening who are interested or wondering what that background process looks like, or what some of the extra steps are that are required to get hired by a law enforcement aviation program, can you kind of walk through what those steps look like?
Well, yeah, obviously you have to be able to pass a background, and it's not necessarily the same background that a police officer has to pass, but it's akin to it. It's a similar process in that we have to vet the person and make sure that they're in good standing, and they don't have a criminal history, they don't have any outstanding obligations against them, and you don't want somebody that can be compromised, right? Because they're gonna have their hands on things that are very critical. So that's just the first part of it, and then you're putting them in charge of these multi-million-dollar aircraft, which are insured for tens of millions of dollars. Not because that's what the aircraft costs, but that's what the damage costs if they fall out of the sky. So this responsibility level is very, very high. So they have to have a background that can be confirmed and qualified. You want them to have a work experience that's commensurate with the job they're going to be doing. And so for us, there's an A&P, which is a basic airframe power plant mechanic. And then there's something called an IA, which is a
inspection authorization.
So that's an additional certification that an A&P can go obtain. And what that allows them to do is sign off maintenance work that's been done, so that they in essence become a quality control person. And so if you have two A&Ps that are both IAs, it's beneficial because one can always kind of go back and over and proof the other one's work and then sign it off. But then some of the stuff that's more nuanced stuff is you have to have people that can triage. So they have to be able to, because the idea is we operate these aircraft, the maintenance level is very, very high. We don't skimp on things. We don't wait to see if something's gonna last longer than it's supposed to. We replace at TBO, which is to be overhauled intervals, or sooner. And if something appears non-standard, it's replaced. And so we operate at a very high level as far as maintenance goes. But the other side of that is the aircraft have to get out of the hangar and go fly, because our mission is to support the men and women of the Ontario Police Department in the city of Ontario. And we can't do that unless the helicopters are in the air. So it's this constant balancing act between these things have to get out and go fly, but we've got to keep them in top condition. And so if you are of the personality that has a hard time kind of problem solving, multitasking, and seeing the big picture, it's going to be a tough transition for you. Because what you need to have is these traits where you can dive in, get something done, complete it, and then move on to the next objective.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. You brought up, we don't skimp on things. If something needs to be replaced, we're going to do that.
Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Safe Structure Designs offers creative, customizable ergonomic safety solutions with over 20 years of experience. Their custom design process is free, ensuring safety and efficiency. Let them create your ideal solution. Visit www.safe-2.com. That's www.safe-2.com for more information.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you for joining us on this special 2-part series of the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS in partnership with Vertical Magazine. We've had the privilege of sitting down with Zina Hullings, the management analyst at the Ontario Police Department Air Support Unit, whose dedication and leadership have truly transformed our unit's operations. Zina's journey from no aviation background to a pivotal leader overseeing aircraft acquisition, maintenance, and mission success is an inspiring testament to her innovation, perseverance, and unwavering commitment to public safety. Her efforts have elevated safety standards, operational efficiency, and the overall effectiveness of her team, making her a deserving recipient of the prestigious Blades of Valor Recognition of Service, Courage, and Flight Award. We'd also like to thank Eric Weidner, the former Ontario PD Air Support Unit Commander, for sharing their insights and experiences. Be sure to look for additional podcasts on the Vertical HeliCASTS platform and articles in Vertical Valor magazine highlighting the other 19 incredible recipients of the Blades of Valor Award. These individuals exemplify the courage, innovation, and leadership that define the very best in public safety aviation.